we wrap up, what are your biggest concerns with future threats? You know, we have a lot of people right now that are worried about many different things. They're worried about, you know, what's going to happen with U.S. and China, what's going to happen with oil, what's going to happen with coronavirus, pandemics, biowarfare, cyber war.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the biggest threat in the future?
I think it may be unfolding right now. And as a medical doctor, I'm appalled and shocked at how we have managed and mismanaged this COVID-19 crisis. We don't have time to go into all that, but the folks I have who worked at Fort Detrick in the biowarfare army have confirmed to me that that was in fact a bioengineered virus, that the response that we're having to it is likely to kill many more people than the virus could. In other words, because of the collapse of the economy, somewhere around 2 to 3 million people may die from poverty, unemployment, not getting medical attention early enough for heart attacks and strokes. Many of my emergency doctor friends are telling me this, who are still in the ER. I'm not in the ER right now. And if you add all those deaths up, there are about 3 to 4 times the number of possible deaths from COVID-19. And so, you know, what a lot of countries did, they did lockdown, and then they had widespread testing, and then they opened up society so things could begin to get back to normal. Well, we didn't do that because there's no widespread testing of either antibodies or the virus enough to know what we're doing. But at the same time, because of that, people are wanting to extend into 2021. Some people are saying 2022 aspects of this lockdown. Well, that will leave our economy in ashes. And if you're a public health official, you can't just look at one metric, i.e. COVID-19 deaths. You've also got to look at all the people who are going to die from alcoholism, suicide, murder, wife beatings, heart attacks, strokes, poverty, not getting medical care, on and on and on and on and on. And when you add all those up, you end up getting a number from what we're doing to respond to the virus that far exceeds the worst possible estimates of deaths from the virus if we even let it run amok. So it's probably the most poorly managed crisis that I've observed in my lifetime. And I was born in 1955. And
how would you have done it? How would you have done it? Would you have taken a Sweden approach?
Yes, a modified Sweden approach where there would have been, through the Defense Authorization Act, massive standing up of testing for both the virus and antibodies, so we would know exactly where it is, contain it, but then let the rest of society function as normally as possible. For example, in Sweden, it's against the law not to send your children to school. And what I'm seeing in I have 9 grandchildren. I have a 10th on the way. And what I'm seeing is that and even though there, you know, in the flu season a couple of years ago, 172 children died of flu. There have only been 3 CDC reported deaths of children from coronavirus. So we have to figure a way to do this in a smart way. But to do it in a smart way, we would have to stand up competence from federal and state governments to do ubiquitous testing. And we haven't done that. We squandered 4 months since January. And by the way, the people I know in the military, the people with PhDs in biological warfare, this was on their radar in December of 2019. And it was known now, it's been proven now that the virus was loose in our society in December of 2019 in Europe and the United States. So we've lost 4 months where we should have stood up that capability and infrastructure. But if we stay on the path we're on with this as open-ended lockdown, the number of deaths from poverty and unemployment, and I think frankly we'll enter into something worse than the Great Depression if we're not careful. My mother grew up during the Great Depression, and the consequences of that and the death from that would be greater than from the virus itself. So now, the other concern I have as someone who's my mother's family were the unfortunate early losers in the Revolutionary War with the British, and were the first prisoner of war with the British in the Pennsylvania Dutch. And what I'm looking at is what happens. Well, like I was at my home in DC recently. At the Safeway in a nice neighborhood, there were a cluster of Army National Guard people and a phalanx of police to go buy your bread. So the concern I have is this virus being used to engage in excessive police state tactics that suspend freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom, all kinds of freedoms, and freedom to make a living, and freedom to have the pursuit of happiness. Now, is there a balance that needs to be struck? Absolutely. We need widespread, ubiquitous testing, contact tracing while we open society up. And that is what should have happened beginning in January. The ball got dropped in January, February, March, April. We've still dropped that ball. I'm just being blunt with you as an emergency doctor. And there are other emergency doctors who have said the same thing, but their videos have been banned off of YouTube.
Yeah, and plenty of them. Do you believe there's an element of Project Mockingbird taking place or no?
100%.
Oh, so do you think any commentators, any of these major anchors that you see on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC, any of these guys, do you think any of them could potentially be also CIA agents or no? They don't know about it. It's behind the scenes executives.
Well, the way that works is that you're talking about the teleprompter junkies, monkeys. I mean, they're the ones reading. They're the ones, the editors, the national security and key editors that decide this story runs, this story doesn't. That's the control point, not the people who are the talent, let's call it, that's on the camera. So it's the control system behind the camera and the editors, and who decides what story is run and what isn't.
Who writes that? How much of what's said is what the anchor takes ownership with, and how much of it is the editor that wrote it and he's simply reading it, or she's reading it?
Well, both is happening, obviously, but what's decided to be on that program goes through a filter, and that's where you get into the problem. Now, I think there have been on all the networks some physicians and others that have surfaced and said, here's what we need to be doing. And there are others who have said, look what's gone on in Sweden. They may have herd immunity by June or July. What I think in the United States, we have the worst of both worlds, because we on the one hand, we have a lockdown situation and a suspension of normal activities that have suspended basic individual and civil rights and business, and has had massive economic damage. But at the same time, we haven't done what, let's say, China and other, like a authoritarian regime like China was able to lock and then test and trace everything. But even democracies like Germany or Portugal, for that matter, or South Korea, they were able to do very widespread testing. And here we have the United States, a medical superpower, a technological superpower, a financial superpower, fumbling around incompetently. For example, a lot of people don't know that in nursing homes, if someone starts having symptoms of COVID-19, that test that they will get for that person is considered a priority 2, which means it takes 8 to 10 days to get the results back. But that's where most of the deaths are happening. Is it sweeping through elderly and sick populations? So almost all of the policies that have been enforced to manage this pandemic have been upside down. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to vent on your show like this, but I'm just outraged by it, frankly, as a doctor.
I mean, I appreciate you